Us 10 sailors should get that. And that's how it flips onto the jack lines on the side decks. My solution is very similar to Chiver's. I've got conventional jack lines in wire along the side decks, and I use just simply two of these, one clipped on. Be capable of withstanding shock loads of you being swept down the deck by a wave, and this implies most of the gear needs to be pretty strong, and a breaking strain of at least 2 tons, 2,000 kilograms is advisable. Now most boats have the jack line along the side deck of the boat, but that has limitations, as we'll see in a moment. It's also important to remember that some of the safety clips that go with jack lines aren't always quite as safe as they appear. Here's a typical eye perhaps on a boat, and if you clip onto it with some types of hook, one way round that, if you've got just simple eyes and got these old-fashioned type hooks, is to put an eye or a shackle onto the eye, simple shackle like that. Get it in there in a moment. And if you clip onto that instead of the eye, even these old-fashioned simple hooks can't come on. No matter how you wiggle it, it won't come undone. So that's sort of a modification you can make if you're still using these old hooks. Even these modern locking hooks can come to grief. If you get it caught round a cleat, as I've shown here, it is possible for them to bend this part of the hook, and it distorts. As you can see, the right-hand version, you can see it distort and can release. So even ordinary jack lines along the side deck won't prevent you from falling overboard. Here my glamorous assistant has got a short tether there, and you can see he's likely to fall overboard from that jack line. It's possible for him to fall overboard, and on a long tether line, particularly vulnerable to falling overboard. At least you're attached to the boat, but it's jolly difficult to get back on board. And in general, the bigger, more modern the boat, with higher freeboard, the more difficult it is to get back on board. So the general solution is to move your jack lines from the side deck to nearer the centre line, and use a short tether line so you can't fall outside the periphery of the guard wires. When you're sailing down to the Azores, the sea temperature is in the sort of 15 to 20 degrees range, and you see your survival time there is actually under 10 hours, probably in about 8 hours. A spray hood handrail, a good idea. We've showed you that. Non-slip footwear. Make certain you've got good shoes and boots. You might think about putting netting or zigzag rope attached to the guard. Bill, you actually fallen overboard on a tether line. Would you like to say a few words about your particular experience?
Right. Well, mine's different to probably all you guys got it. So on mine, I've made a short video on my iPad, which afterwards, if you want to, you can have a look at it. So one of the things of mine, when you're in the water and these get wet, so this is attached to your point, and you're pulling on this. This slips very easy in the water. I have inch-thick, 3-bladed rope, like we used to use at school, climbing the ropes at school. It's really thick. It's got a good grip. Now the other thing with mine, I'm going to go the opposite way to Tony. I go from my cockpit. I've got a westerly 22, so it's very small. So I go from the cockpit right forward on my tether. I've got my harness on, I've got my tether. Now, this is where I differ again. It doesn't come undone. 22 days to the Azores. It only came off once on a calm day when I went inside and had a strip wash. If it's hot, I strip off, I've got, say, trunks on, I still got my harness on. It stays on day and night. Going to a loo, cooking, sleeping, it never comes off. That's it. Right, so there's none of this unclipping or whatever. Yes, I forget the year, Tony, going out past the Scillies. Now, whether it was tide grip or whatever, it was rough. So I went forward, and 1 minute the boat just flipped, and I went straight over. The initial thing was, I was in the water, I didn't lose my glasses, but I threw up straight away. The shock, like Tony was saying about the water temperature, threw up. With that, so now I'm sort of midships of the boat, and as people say, oh, you'll end up at the back of the boat, that can never happen. Simple reason, the rigging's in the way. I fall over, I'm on my lower stays, then a cap shroud, then the aft stays. So I end up like midships. So I pulled myself forward. Again, you have to see the picture. My boat is small, so if I'm in the water, if this is the water level, my boat is sort of here. So with it being rough, it sort of helped me back on the boat. And if you see old films, people on square riggers, some of the lucky ones, they've been swept over with a wave. The next waves come back and they swept them back on board. And that's sort of similar what it did to me, with me pulling on my rope, which I had a damn good grip on. Climbed back into the thing and then just sat there and let the boat do what it was like to get over it. But the shock initially, you will get this shock. In the summer, it wasn't like freezing cold, but it's the shock of the cold water, and you suddenly think, what the bloody hell am I doing here? Being taken on at night, suddenly you can be asleep, you know something's gone wrong with the boat. Before you know it, you're in the cockpit, going for this thing, and you're not clipped on. And that's happened to people before. Sorry.
One question. You always wear a harness.
Yeah.
Would you like to comment, if you were to wear a life jacket and the life jacket would have gone
No, I
off?
never wear a life jacket.
Well, the question I've got exactly,
Yeah.
in that situation, would you think you would have been able to get back on board again with this huge bladder thing in front of you?
Alright, so yeah, it's a good point. So the other thing to do that I've done, and I bet no one here in this room's done it, I was going to say to Tony, right, so before COVID, going up to Newtown, come through Hurst Castle, so I said to Pat, my girlfriend, said, right, on the helm we're doing about 4 to 5 knots. Mine's a small boat, 5 knots is like, that's it. Downhill with the wind up your ass, that's about as fast as you're going to go. So keep going to Newtown Creek, fully dressed, walk up to the bow and throw myself off. Right, so I'm in the water, fully clothed, being towed along in my boat. Again, I pulled up, again you show the video, I've pulled up and I've altered it. Up the front I've got 2 8 or 10, I think it's 8mm eye bolts either side, and at the cockpit, and there's a rope with a plastic footrest. I pull that, it's just on a piece of like bungee cord, I just pull that, it comes down in the water, you can either put your knee in it or put your foot in it, and you're straight back on side. And so that's what I did, so just to improve my thing. But I'm going along, I've thrown myself off, fully clothed. I said to Pat back there, she looked at me, I said, don't stop, don't stop. And now I've got to get back on the boat. So
to do
that's your test, right? Right, so that's my system. Thank you.
Well, actually, Bill has emphasised my final point. Finally, having all this gear is all very well, but you've got to remember to clip on always, or as Bill says, be clipped on all the time. And that's the life jacket I've been using in recent years, and in that I've got a PLB and an AIC perk. So you can pack them down quite small, and they're reasonably comfortable to wear and don't get in the way too much when you're in the cockpit or working around the deck. So I think I'll stop there now and invite ideas, better ideas than I've been that we've discussed. Katie?
Am I correct in thinking
I only started really serious single-handed sailing in 2018 with a slightly dodgy passage across the channel, and then I did the Baltimore Challenge in 2019, and that gave me the confidence to give the Azores a go in 2021. But despite 20 years of sailing and various adventures, I'd never sailed in a gale before preparation. I basically wanted to get some confidence in three key areas. So the boat, the skipper, and whatever tactics I chose to deploy. And a big part of that preparation was thinking through those things and either doing things or putting things in place, but basically giving myself some confidence that those three components were okay. So that's what I'm going to run through, is how I thought things through. And then I'll touch upon what weather we experienced in 2021, heavy weather, and finish up with some reflections at the end. So first of all, the first thing is obviously the boat. So here's my boat, which, as you can see, is a wooden boat, fairly rare these days. A traditional sort of 1950s design, but not actually built till the 70s. And as I said, I've owned her since 2002. And like most wooden boat owners, I've done a huge amount of work on her over the years, lots of repairs, renovations, improvements, and I've pretty much worked on every aspect of her, so I know her very well. I changed my cockpit reefing to bring it all back to the cockpit. Halyards, topping lift, fore and aft reefing pennants, all back to the cockpit, and stuck on a couple of new to me very flash winches. Replaced my old Tuffnell winches there, thinking that was going to be a really good idea to do work in the cockpit. And I'll come back to this, I bought off eBay a rather large parachute anchor, which I shall touch upon a bit later. And at the end of all that, I thought, okay, I've worked through each of the elements in turn of the boat in the context of heavy weather and what demands might put upon it. I have done, and there are some improvements I can do, but fundamentally, the boat is what she is. I'm not going to suddenly change her characteristics, and I'm kind of stuck with that, for better or for worse. It's a bit like a marriage, in sickness and in health, until, no, we won't go there. And also, I have realistic constraints in terms of money and time and energy and effort. So I have to make some priorities about what I spend that on and what I don't. But at the end of the day, I felt, firstly, that I do have a strong and seaworthy and well-equipped boat. And it's actually, of the three things that I'm looking at, boat, skipper and tactics, the boat is probably the least of my worries. Probably the biggest of my worries is the skipper. And there he is, good looking chap that he is, in all his glory. And I actually think that a little bit of honest self-analysis is a really important thing to do. Good stuff and bad stuff. I think you're going out into the deep blue yonder. You're not going to see anyone for days and days and days. And despite what we've just been hearing about life jackets and rescues, if you go over there, I didn't see anyone. Literally didn't see. I didn't even see a bird for a week, let alone another boat. So how I am in myself is really important, and my own resources are really, really important. So on the plus side, I think I'm a pretty calm and emotionally stable person. I've been told I'm a good man in a crisis. I don't panic. I'm pretty resourceful, I'm a good problem solver, and I'm pretty practical and pragmatic as a person. And I think those are all characteristics I'm proud of, and I think are very good ones for going out into potentially heavy weather. And I probably should just stop there, really. But there are possibly some negatives. The first one is, you know, I'm a real novice in this situation. I have never sailed in a gale. You know, every time it approaches that, I either stay in harbour or I run for harbour, as any good coastal sailor will do. And I've successfully done that for 20 years. But I have, you know, you can't do that out in the Atlantic. You get whatever the weather throws at you. So, you know, I genuinely am a novice. And so things like exhaustion and seasickness and injury are very real risks, as I see it. And we have to really guard against those. And then there is the sort of the fear factor, the unknown. This was a massive step up for me, going out to the Azores, a huge gear change in terms of the challenge, which is what the wonderful thing about the Jester Challenge is. So heavy weather for me starts at about force 7, and of course there's a variation between that, big difference between force 7 and force 12. So I've split it into two, and I think, you know, lots of people kind of do this in the chum ship before, between what I've called rough and then survival. And of course, heavy weather doesn't just happen, it develops. And it develops over a period of time. It might be a relatively short period of time, not be a long period of time. But you don't go straight to a force 10 when you've been sailing at force 3, you know, quite completely. It builds up. So I wanted to reflect that in my tactics. I wanted tactics that also evolve incrementally, if you like, with that. I don't want to have one set of tactics for rough weather and then a completely different tactic for survival conditions. And I suppose that's where the Jordan series drogue really comes in, because that is much more of a passive drogue, you know, very well regarded. Lots of people absolutely swear by it. And there was a great talk by the OCC a couple of weeks ago, somebody may have dialed into on the Jordan series, and I would certainly never you know, have anything bad to say about it. Thank you very much.
All the cubbies secured to stop bits falling out. The cabin sole boards, I fitted inserts to be able to screw down the floorboards. When I first got Panacea, I did a lot of rewiring of the boat because it was in fairly poor shape, but I was lucky I was able to pinch stuff from work. And
Go along, find a berth, go to the office, they tell you which one you should have gone in, and yeah, very relaxed. Communicating with ships, mixed. If a ship looks like it's on a half-mile CPA and you can't do anything about it because it's a 4-7, it's best to at least find out if they've seen you, and if they haven't, well, go to bed. I don't know what you do then. This little thing is a Garmin InReach. It's not the Model 2, it's the Model 1, and that was basically my sole means of communicating. I'll come on to that a bit more in a minute. EPIRB and handheld VHF. Handheld VHF is pointless. And this is the heart of quite a bit of my radio reception. It's a shortwave radio and an FM radio and an MP3 player, so it's my entertainment and everything. I can reach that and that. I can reach all of them from my bunk. So when I'm lying in bed, I'm the radio operator. And then at the top of the antenna, the VHF antenna, I don't have a splitter or combiner, whatever you want to call it, for AIS and VHF. You know, it's cost, it's a weak point, I actually get more diversity by swapping over VHF and AIS as I feel the conditions dictate. I can't tell you exactly why I would do it. I just feel I ought to do it at times. Right. I mentioned the Garmin InReach. You can do these little messages. I think they're 160 characters. I asked someone on the helm what the protocol was for messaging, and they go, "Oh, there's no protocol. Any message you put out in the public domain, they reserve the right to put up on the website." So I was text chatting with my wife, and she said to me, "All you ever talk about is the weather."
So will you explain how that InReach works then? Because you're sending a text message, so you're sending a text message to a particular phone number?
You can send it to a thing called Map Live Share, and that goes out to anyone who's got access to the URL to your tracker. You can send it out to nominated email accounts, and that's just a one-to-one or a one-to-a-group. You've got quite a lot of control. I'll come back to that a little, maybe not a lot more detail, but I'll come back to that in a bit, if that's all right, Ian, because it's bloody complicated. Well, for me it was. It's the sort of thing it's the sort of thing that if you had a 12-year-old on board, they'd go, "Oh, Dad, look." Right. I probably won't bother with a Garmin weather message again. It's £1 down the drain if you get the marine version, in my opinion. But it's something to do when you know, fed up with being buffeted around. Yeah, have options with the weather fax reception. I had 2 iPads and an iPhone with me. Both the iPads, the audio input failed. So I had proper iPad 4-pole audio cables, but they still broke the actual connector in the iPad. And I ended up using my iPhone, which is fine. You just said it's just a smaller picture. Short and sweet.
One thing that puzzles me is you've not mentioned uGrib, and I used uGrib for all my trips via a sat phone. Am I out of date? Has it gone by? You know, the last trip I did was
I think it's the other
2016.
way around, Roger. I think it's the other. I didn't know what that was. I still don't, but I
Oh,
will find out.
yeah.
Perhaps those people that were thinking of doing the Azores challenge but perhaps didn't have the confidence, or perhaps some people that had entered a previous Azores challenge but hadn't got to the start line for various reasons that we all know happen in life. And when I was thinking what the presentation might look like, I was thinking back to 2008 and my lead up to my first Azores challenge. And it took me an awful long time to get going. A couple of years before the challenge, I'd done very little sort of passage making, certainly hadn't done very much single-handed sailing. And I remember the experience of being a bit like a roller coaster. So I was on these huge highs from time to time thinking, this is great, I'm doing something, I'm sort of seriously working towards something that I've dreamt about doing for years. I'd always wanted to do a single-handed passage, ocean passage. That was great, I was on a real high. And then I hit these lows, these troughs. I was thinking, bloody hell, have I bitten off more than I can actually chew? Have I got the skills to do all of this? Have I got the right boat? Am I doing the right preparation? And I very much remember my first Jester meet. We used to meet in London in those days. And it was a big room full of loads of people. Everybody was really, really nice. But there was a lot of talk going on that I just thought, I'm just sort of nowhere near having perhaps the experience that I need to do this. And I found, this is just a list of some of the things, a few of the things. I'm just going to go through these quickly one by one. Because, as I say, this isn't necessarily the right thing to do. This is just some of the things that I worried about. I guess we'd all read books of people turning 360, and somebody's already mentioned it today. The guys with the Russ of 42 rather, told me that, explained what had happened to them. So my strategy was thinking, well, actually, what I need to make sure is that everything is watertight. So if I'm turning upside down, I'm going to be as watertight as possible. And I also had, on both the boats that I've had reinforced windows. The cockpit lockers I lined with foam mat. Unfortunately my wife's camping mat, but it served her very well as making those lockers watertight. I reviewed the actions for losing the mast, which is, I think can happen quite a bit on a roll, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. And then, a bit like George was saying, I ensured that everything below was secured. If those of you that read the book about the 79 Fastnet, I seem to recall reading of people's crew not being able to go down below because there was so much debris flying about, and it was actually safer on deck, not that you really want to be on deck. So I made, because fundamentally you want to save as much of that mast as you can. For some of you that know John Margerson, not been around for a few years, really experienced, tough old bird. Tough old bird. When I was moored next to John in the 2012 Azores, I remember saying to John, just out of, do you get nervous at all, John? He said, no, F it, he said, I just want to get going. And tough old cookie. Well, he'd actually lost his mast. It was about 24 hours out from the Azores, but he managed to get the whole thing on board. He obviously didn't have to dump it because it wasn't doing any damage. So my thoughts would be to save as much of the mast as I can. If not, if it's got to go, if it's damaging the hull, then it's the bottle screws and get it off as quickly as possible. So I did actually build myself a new rudder, and it was enormous. And it was massively over-engineered, and it was slid down by the engine box, and it got in the way all the time. But I thought if I lose my rudder, at least I've got something else to put on the stern of the boat. I also carried a spare oar. It was, as I said, it was Roger Taylor that said to me, you need to make sure you're really comfortable with sailing at night. It is a little bit daunting for me. It was daunting for me the first time I put a reef in the dark. I did put the light on just to sort of try and light the deck. And then eating and drinking, as I said, you know, I really got to learn how I function. And what I ended up doing is I ended up having a number of different carrier bags, and each carrier bag represented a day's food. So I had breakfast, dinner, lunch and snacks in one bag, and I had 30 of those for the Azores. I'm just going to finish off by sharing this. This was something that somebody mentioned to me a few years ago, and they spoke about fear, basically false evidence appearing real. And actually, you know, we might have this fear, this worry, that the whole thing is going to go tits up. Excuse me. But is there any evidence of that? And if there is evidence of it, then you need to have a strategy, perhaps, for that, to help you get over that sort of start line. And that's all from me.
So basically, that's 2010, where I ran into Breton Reef at Newport. It's 2014, came back to the Azores, 14 days, 2,000 miles, average 6 knots. Amazing trip that was. But anyway, getting down to business, these are my Azores trips, one way and another. And what I plan to do is just go through each of the 3 trips that I did, and hopefully you may be able to learn something from me. I don't know, but that's up to you. In other words, if you, get west, but if you can't get west, sail the best line you can, but err on the westerly side. Just edge out. And if you think about it, the lows tend to, they come across the Atlantic, don't they? Whistling round here, and then they sweep up through Scotland. So at the front of the low, the wind's against you, basically. So ideally you want to get, this is my thinking, you want to get the other side of the low. So once you get into the low, you've got westerlies coming along the bottom. And then once you get a bit further through, they go round to the northwest, and then the north wind, they're whizzing you straight down to the Azores. If we look at my first trip, 2008, 2008 is this line here. You can see I virtually sailed down the rum line. I was surprised to hear that Paul had actually had some rough weather, because I thought it was actually the easiest trip I'd actually done. It was the fastest trip by all means. It took me 11 days and 14 hours.
On the way back.
It was a lot of free sailing. And I didn't run into any heavy weather at all. Maybe I was a bit earlier than them, I don't know. But
I just wondered that was on the way back.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. No,
that
if you look
explains
at-
it, Paul.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, it's,
So that was the weather when I was about 3 days out, now about here, as you can see. There's the UK, it's twisted.
Excuse me, do you mind?
So I had quite reasonable weather, and by the 5th of June, I was well down. I think that is actually, yeah. But the Azores High is here, and that's the other fella you got to think about. It's quite useful, and I've got to note that it's moving north, and in actual fact, when you look at it on the 10th, there it is. And you can see why I had an easy trip, because that high came up with its clockwise rotation. I got nice westerlies at the top there, and then it came up behind me. Fortunately, I don't know how it gave me some southwesters as it was coming up, and it just kept me over this side of the line, and this is the run line, and it kept me away from the centre, so I didn't get any calm conditions. I actually got good conditions all the way, and which is why I ended up with a really quick trip. And that's, I think, you know, these are the things you're going to have to deal with. 2012. So there's the 2012. I've only put up one weather chart for that in actual fact, because it was another quick trip. It took me 12 days, 18 hours, so it was a day and a bit longer than the previous one. And the high pressure is all dominant over here on the continent. The low pressure is all out here, all the low pressures. So generally, the prevailing conditions at the time gave me these rather calm conditions. You can see all the pressure lines are all well spaced, and gave me a good trip down. And so I've not a lot to say to that one really, except that I had an easy ride. So 2016. Now, this 2016 we started on the 15th of May. All the previous ones we'd started later than that, and you guys, you're setting off on the 16th of June. So I don't know whether that's significant, but it was certainly a very different trip going earlier in the year in 2016. So just move on. Whether you can see it on here, but this is the 2016 trip. And I looked at my notes, and they said struggling to get west. I'm disobeying all the rules that I've just said to you. This is where I am on the about the 20th of May here off the Iberian Peninsula there, not far from Fastnet. So after 5 days, I've been forced down there, and I was getting a heading of about 220 degrees. If you think about, I don't know what your boats are like, but 220 degrees, that's 235, this is 220. If you want to tack, I'm sure you can't get 100 degrees. When the weather is rough, 120, 130 degrees, that makes the course 340, 350. You know, it was very unattractive. I should have tried to get west, but it was taking me away from where I was wanting to go, so I was very reluctant to tack. And you'll realise I'm saying I was on starboard for 5 days, all the way down there. And on the 20th of May, we got a storm warning. And the storm warning I got from my land base, and I also listened to the chat that Azores guys were having, and a lot of them decided it was time to go home. So several Azores challengers decided that they were going to go back to Blighty or perhaps go into France. So my position was 100 miles north of Fastnet and 65 degrees west, and that was here. And so what do? I'm away from home. I mean, she's a quick boat, is Ella Trout, but I got no charts for Spain. I've got French charts, but I'm here. and this warning of this low is coming in, the storm warning, enough to frighten some of the other guys away. So what's my course of action? Should I, let's have a look. We'll bear that on at the moment. I'll send it on to the next one. There's our storm, 987 out there. That's the first one. This is following. This is a day later after my decision. But basically, I decided. Sorry, bear with me. So my option is to either go into Finisterre. Just go back one. Go into Finisterre. So I could go into Finisterre, but Finisterre, I've never been, I didn't know it. I did know that you've got, as you can see there, there's places there where you're going to get shelter from the north, west and east, but it's open to the west. So I didn't fancy that too much. I could go back into the Bay of Biscay, because I had got chance for the French coast there, but I didn't know how long it would take me. And do I want to go in, sailing into onto a lee shore, possibly at night? A strange place I've never been, no knowledge of that area at all. So I could stay out, that was the other thing. I mean, I've been a long way. By 2016 I've done the Atlantic twice, and I've done 2 other Azores. So should I just stick it out and say, I'll fight it out, I'll cope with it. But the other alternative was to run south. And basically, we go back to the first sign of this low. That's what I decided to do. You can see the conditions here are very benign. And in actual fact, if I go on to the next chart, there's this high which came in. And I flew down there. I got not only the ocean current pushing me down, I got this high pushing me down. I did 100 miles in 24 hours that day. And that was the weather I was faced with. Here we are. Nice little low going against us. Day later, another nice little go. I was beating, that's the next 2 days, so it's 24 hours, solid beating. We go forward another couple, and you can see again, same situation, 27th, 28th, I'm beating, I'm caught up in the low over there, I'm beating here. So it was a very heavy beat all the way, hard work, few occasional gaps in the weather, but generally 3 reefs and a very reduced Genoa, because that's what I tend to do before I have to take anything off. So I did carry the full rig, but I carried it about 3 reefs in, and well past the sailmaker's reefing marks on the Genoa. I actually have a series of coloured marks, all different colours and shapes, along the bottom of my Genoa. So I know what I've wound it into. So the sailmaker puts a 1 and a 2 for the 2 reefs he expects you to use, but in actual fact they're quite useless when you really want to get a nice regular set of your Genoa. So I've got marks along the base of the thing. The problem was, as I think that chart might be showing you, I'm arriving at Terceira. And what have we got here? That low is only 1 point different from the one we ran away from, and the alarm will wake me in 3 hours. So my reasoning was, yeah, get your head down, go for it. So it wasn't quite as mad a decision. I had a pretty good idea how things would go, and so I did. I went to sleep, and lo and behold, I know now, having done the research for this chap today, why, but in actual fact, after an hour, I was suddenly wide awake. And if you plan your sleep, my experience again, I think your mind's still alert. It knows it's on the alert. And something had changed, and the wind had gone. I was on 3 reefs and virtually no Genoa. And obviously I became aware that suddenly there was no wind. That wasn't forecast, it shouldn't have happened. And so I woke up, and the wind had freed, it had gone slack. I shook out all the sails. I got up to full sail. I could tack and I could run down the east face of Terceira, and by 9 o'clock I was in the harbour. And I don't know what had happened until just a month or so ago when I was planning for this. The only thing I could think is that centre, it wasn't actually quite there. I can only think that that centre actually passed over me. I can't explain any other reason why the wind would have just died and gone. So that's my reason, that's my hindsight. So let's look at hindsight. So what I'm leading to is, did I make the right decision? So was it the right decision to run south when I did? With hindsight, I'd say no. I should have just pressed on, because if we move on another, we'll go, oh, sorry, wrong way. We'll go back to the 23rd. Instead of running down there, if I'd have just, it would have, the wind, because I'm on a free leg there, the wind would have allowed me to come down here. I'd have missed the bulk of that storm if I'd just carried on. I didn't need to run south. I didn't know that at the time, of course. And so, with hindsight, I'd say no, I didn't make the right decision. But was I influenced by others? I think I was influenced by others. There's the talk on the radio waves about people retiring, going back to Blighty. It influences what you do. So I would suggest somehow things will occur. You need to detach yourself from other people and just look at your own situation. Because I'm sure I was influenced by others.
Us 10 sailors should get that. I